Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Paula McCain. I'm a business advisor with the North Central Texas Small Business Development Center. We are a leading provider of assistance for small businesses. We are grant funded, and because of that, we can bring webinars and other resources to you at no cost. Today's presentation is Inflation and Paying Your Employees, presented by Rebecca Schultz. Rebecca's been helping business owners to access money and financial education for over 25 years. She is the founder and executive loan consultant for CenterLock Funding. Welcome, Rebecca. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Paula, and thank you, team, for bringing me on, because this is a really interesting conversation. And those that are either joining us today or maybe watching later, I'm sure some way, shape, or form inflation has hit you, right? And understanding how that impacts our employees today and future employees is a pretty important conversation. So we're going to try our best to tackle it, all right? Okay, with that being said, let me share my screen with you so we can get going. Great. Wait just 1 second. Let me go into presentation mode. All right, can you see two screens or one, Paula?
Two.
All right, let me swap it out. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now we're ready. All right, so we're talking about inflation and paying your employees. I am Rebecca Schultz, and if you haven't seen me already, I'm just going to tell you a little secret. I love money. I do. I love money. I love keeping it. I love spending it, right? And I think all of us actually do. So the conversation's not about, hard, difficult topics. It's about something that we love, right? Money. All right, so just moving on. I do have over 25 years worth of lending experience, and although that sounds dry and boring, it's not. It's anything but dry and boring. It's exciting and invigorating. I help people's dreams come true, right? And so I'm going to take all that experience and knowledge, as well as what I do professionally through my firm, which is help business owners understand and access capital, right, or money. I'm going to take all of that and kind of pour it into this topic today. All right. I love either bringing a meaningful quote, right, or memes, something funny to the table before we start. And I couldn't resist. I think we all need a little laugh. All right. So if it has felt like over the last 2 years that we are living in Twilight Zone, right, and there's many times, so I'm sure we could say we felt like that. This meme just, says it all, right? History teachers in 30 years will be explaining everything that happened during this time set, and it's not going to look pretty, right? It's going to look scary. I know we're living through the times right now. Hopefully that made you giggle. Okay, so we've divided up the conversation into really 6 areas, and then we're going to come away with a summary on everything that's going on, right? And so I've divided the conversation into understanding what I'm calling the inflation dilemma. Right, we're living and breathing it right now. It's actually coming up quickly, like a flood that's starting to rise. Right, so we're going to talk a little bit about how that's happening, what that looks like. Then we're going to talk about the increased pressures on the labor demand. Right, it's all connected. It's amazingly connected. Right, and then we're going to step away from that viewpoint and try to come up with understanding what we can do about it, right? Because I'm a big believer that things don't just happen to us. They do, right? But we have a lot to say, and we can make actions that either help or improve, right? Or make things worse. So we're going to talk about what we can do in this situation to improve things. All right. Then we're going to understand assumptions. I feel like I talk all the time about assumptions, and I'll keep talking about them because right now they are critical. Understanding your business, what's happening in your industry and other industries around your business, extremely important in today's economic viewpoint. So we're going to try to understand that. We're going to talk a little bit about financial forecasts. That's like predicting the future, right? So how do we understand the future from where we are today to help protect us? We'll go into that. And then more importantly, it's all about leadership. You knew that in kindergarten, right? You knew that a long time ago. It has not changed. It's about leadership. And I'm going to just add one little component to that, financial leadership, that's going to help businesses come out of this situation in the best possible condition. All right. And then we'll summarize all that. But that's the agenda today. Does that sound fair? Okay, let's get started. So here we go. We've got inflation, right? The inflation dilemma. Lots of questions. It's dark. It's a little foreboding. We don't know how we're going to get around it, right? But there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that's what we're going to talk about is the light on this. All right, so I'm going to just ask that question. What is inflation? Right? I'll let you think about it for a second. All right, so we could define it a couple different ways. I'm going to define it for our conversation in saying that inflation happens when our buying power, right, our dollar, right, isn't as strong. It starts to decline. So what I could buy or purchase with that dollar yesterday is going to be diminished, right? Inflation takes it down, declines it today. Right? And then just to put that in a very simple format, we really have too much money chasing too few goods or services, right? There's a lot of money out there and not enough goods or services. Does that feel right with our current economic situation, right? Like when we go to the grocery stores and there's not a lot on the shelves, right? People got a lot of money, right? They're willing to pay more, but there's not as enough goods or services around to satisfy the demand. Welcome to inflation. Now, our inflation problem is actually very deep. Okay? It's deep because it's really a pricing increase in two folds. Our raw materials cost more, as well as the cost to bring those goods or services to market costs have increased. All right, so raw materials have increased. Let's think about lumber, right? Steel, things for construction. We know, right, that those costs have increased. They've been on a steep incline. We also know that to get that lumber or those materials from where they're created or stored to where we need them, right, that's the shipping and transportation, those costs have increased. Right. This has created, like I said, a deep problem. It's not a simple inflation where it's maybe just one fold, where the raw materials are hard to get, right, or they cost more. It's a much deeper impact that we are dealing with, right? And so the impacts of inflation, just to kind of summarize this, and I'm going to give you this view from more of a consumer side rather than a business side. I'll flip it in a minute, all right? I just really want you to see more or less from the consumer side what our employees are looking at. All right, understanding that inflation is coming, understanding that there's fewer goods and services, lots more money chasing them. Paying employees is part of that conversation, right? Their lives are being impacted. Our employees' lives are being impacted. How are they being impacted? And what's our role as employers in this conversation? Ugh, right? All right, so in 2020, 7% increase in prices. That was the largest increase in pricing since way back when in 1982, when especially for Texas with the oil bust, right? Lots of bad things happened back then in that recession. This is the 7% increase. It's the largest increase since that devastating time. Right, in 2021, the average American family, right, saw a $4,000 increase in costs, according to Harvard economists. Right, so just to continue living, right, in a similar means, $4,000 more for that average American family in 2021. Okay, so we're starting to see this, right? Starting to see this. All right, so from that consumer impact, what are they dealing with? Well, just this year, since January 1st, a 15% increase in food prices. So this is just a need. This is not a want. This is a need, food. right? 15% increase in prices just right now from the beginning of this year. All right. What's happening in a larger scale is because the costs have gone up and the average American families are not able to meet that 15% increase, they're going out to places like food banks and food pantries. And those organizations have seen an increase in demand, right? So an increase in population, trying to get support for food through free or assisted services. All right, so that's not it, right? It's not just about the food. This need has increased. And guess what? Our subprime lenders, remember them? They were in trouble a while back, about 10 years ago. They got to the market and they were giving houses or home loans out, right? And they were increasing the rates for those home loans. And then it created a huge mortgage bubble. Remember that? Well, they're back at it again. All right, so subprime lenders are active. They're basically trying to meet these borrowers' demands. And so they've increased credit card borrowing to individuals with lower credit scores, below a 660. So we're starting to see more consumers going out and taking on expensive money to meet the demands of increased costs. All right, now that makes me bite my nails. That makes me nervous. We know how that ends, right? It doesn't end pretty. All right, so if you're thinking, well, why aren't these people just going and getting jobs? There's jobs everywhere, right? Let me give you a little viewpoint on that. So far, hourly wages were up 4.85% in November of 2021. So last November, those wages had gone up. So they're working more, right? They're getting paid more, right? But this is where it gets a little tricky, right? Hourly wages are going to increase again, 3.9% in 2022, right? That's the largest increase that we've seen since 2008 when we had that recession. Right now, if we put that together, right, 4.85, that was in 2021. Let's say we increase it by another 3.8. We are still not at 15% increase for just the food. And it's not just the food prices that are going up, right? The prices of everything are going up. So would you agree with me that we are in a pickle, right? We're in a pickle here. Pickles coming, right? And I don't like pickles personally. We're in it. We're trying to figure out what to do. And worst of all, as business owners, where we rely on the labor of these individual consumers, right? They're going to be looking to us as those financial leaders. You didn't want me to pull that word out, did you? They're going to be looking at us for financial leadership to help them figure out how to improve their own life, right? Because those costs are coming in. We're the natural solution to them. All right, so there's increased costs. There's going to be increased financial pressure, especially if they're going out there and they're borrowing to make up the difference, right? From those subprime lenders that are charging a lot of interest. That's a problem that's just building overnight. Well, the costs are going to continue to rise. We know that, right? They're going to, I don't know how much they're going to rise, but we know they're going to continue to rise, right? And we also know as they leverage themselves, they're going to be able to afford less, correct? They won't qualify for more debt. So they're going to get leverage, right? So it's going to be less of an option. Now, I hate to say this, but the government's not going to rush in and help anybody at this point. There's no government aid in the works. That's already been played out, right? That's kind of how we got into this situation is there's a lot of money coming from the government and increasing the type of surplus within the economy. Now, like a big sponge, they're trying to take it out. Okay. They're trying to take out the extra money so things can level back down. So there's no additional money coming in to save these folks. Now, banks are businesses too, right? Banks and financial institutions are businesses too. And when they're faced with increased costs, which we know is coming from the Federal Reserve, an increased Wall Street Journal prime rate, increased treasury bonds, like we'll talk more about that shortly, they have to also make money. That means they're going to start having to raise their fees and raise costs, which just like the food costs going up, right? You got to have access to your money, got to have access to resources. So that cost is going to go up. All right, consumers are going to be looking for increased wages, right, or additional employment to support these increased costs. It's just going to have to happen. All right, now how we respond to it as business owners may be different. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about labor, right? Labor, those people that we need to help operate and run the business, right? Critical to operations for many of us. We know that there's an increase in demand. We're feeling it. A lot of businesses, maybe they still had some recovery to do in 2021, but for the most part, businesses were able to find additional opportunities and they saw additional demand. And now going into 2022, right? We're ending our first quarter, going into 2022, there's additional demand still pinned up in the market. And we're trying to meet that demand. We're trying to make sure that we continue to grow. It's an awkward situation, to be honest with you. We need the people, there's high demand, inflation's happening. These employees that we're trying to hire and retain, they're requiring more money, right? It's like this vicious cycle. I just like to show people that we need to maybe slow down just a moment, pull ourselves out of our unique situations and try to understand the bigger picture. So COVID-19, right, the disaster funds that were poured into the economy, right, they had a specific goal. This goal matches what we're seeing right now. That's a little mind-blowing, but it's true. Federal assistance, right, low interest rate loans, right, they were put into the economy between 2020 and 2021 to try to help people survive, right? Help give them the ability to grow and move beyond any type of potential slowdown. Those low rates and easy access to capital were made really in an effort to reduce unemployment, to keep people employed, keep them going, right? So that our economic engine didn't come to a grinding halt. What happened as a result of that, right, is that strong demand. Individuals were pinned up. Maybe they couldn't go on cruises or they couldn't travel. Or going out to the store or the mall wasn't something that they could do within that period of time or a big chunk of that period of time. But they had money sitting in the bank that they were unable to spend, right? Sounds crazy. And so there was this pent up demand, large part within that market that was playing out in 2021 and continues to play out, right? And businesses were in a unique position where they were able to really gain pricing power, right? If there was a limited supply on X goods and they had them, and getting more of those X goods from outside of the country, or like say shipping container issues, right? They had pricing power. They could charge more for them, which increased the amount of profitability they may have had. Now, this isn't for all businesses, right? Some of you out there may be saying, where did that money flow to me? I didn't see it. Understood. We're talking in general terms here. But that increased pricing power, increased demand created a need for more employees, right? And that's what a lot of business owners are trying to respond to. Is the demand, is the lost sales, right? Is this, this burning to continue to grow? All right. Now, when we're in this type of unique labor market where we have high demand and not enough people, right? We're going to start to see that type of demand or that type of offset come back to wages, right? Being able to or being requested to increase wages, which ultimately increase the cost to our business, right? Increase because of this increased revenue side, right? There's also this reduced goods, right? A competitive labor market has really spurred, and we're operating with this assumption. And I'm not going to say that it's correct or false, okay? That's going to be different for each one of us. But there's this assumption out there that if we get more labor, we get more people working for us, then we can get more revenue, right? It almost feels like we'll grow out of this problem, right? More labor, more salespeople, more people making the widgets, right? More revenue. We'll be able to go ahead and pay for the increased costs, the shipping costs, right? Increase wages, and we can grow our way out of this mess, right? But the question is that really true, right? Limited staff, limited people is forcing us to look at our businesses differently, right? We're forced to see whether or not we have to reduce the hours of operations in order to really cover the shifts, right? And that may mean if we're reducing hours or reduce staff, we're unable to support the new business, right? And we're unable to generate additional revenue to meet or maintain the operations. See, it's a slippery slope here, right? We're either on the upswing and we've got to create the revenue in order to really support the increased costs and demand, right? Or we step back from that and have to evaluate it and retract a little bit and understand this. We're ultimately having to make decisions within our business, right? So, deep breath. It's going to look different for each of us, right? But let's look at what we can do, right? What can we do about the situation? Now, how you answer these questions for your business is going to be unique, right? We're going to just bring some questions to the table, and I want you to do some reflection on these types of questions to really understand your business a little bit better. But we're part of a much larger conversation. And that's what I'm hoping you're seeing from that initial understanding of inflation, how it's impacting consumers, how that labor market's connected to that initial question or challenge, right? This labor challenge is complex. It's not something that's simple, right? And in fact, just to illustrate that, if we were taking a business that is seeing an increase in demand, but yet not enough people to support the demand, right? So they are definitely looking for increased labor, right? Willing to even pay a little bit more for that labor, but they're looking for labor. If we gave them that labor, right? The question is whether demand will still continue to be there for a long period of time as we're beating inflation. We want to answer yes, right? Because those are the initial assumptions. But because this labor challenge is complex, and we know that money has to come out of the economy in order to right the ship, we really need to start thinking about all the areas of our business where this inflation is impacting and understanding our cash flow, our cash cycle a little bit better. All right, so increased wages may not be the only solution. All right, I know that's hard to say. It feels like we're under the gun to grab those really strong candidates off the market to meet the demand. We'll pay them more because otherwise, if we're not paying them, we're not making the revenue. But that's where we need to take the deep breath. There needs to be a balance between the wages and that operational efficiency, right? We can't necessarily pay somebody tons of money and then turn back and look at our own internal impact from inflation with increased costs and still justify paying those wages. I think everybody understands that, right? There needs to be a balance. And I'm just going to point to an old adage. I know we use it a lot in the banking or financial services market. All right, I'm hoping you guys are familiar with it. It's that old adage that you don't throw money at problems, right? That only makes them worse. You could also say you don't throw good money at bad money, right? Because it doesn't always solve the problem. So we start to get into this cycle of really what's best for our business, right? Increased costs, inflation are going up. We need the labor, right, in order to continue operating and making the money. But is that really what needs to happen in this market? So remember I said it's all unique, right? It's unique to our business. This is where we really need to take a step back, go deep in reflection, and try to understand our business a little bit better. And to understand our business, I'm not going to just say, you know, look at your customers or clients and the trends that you're seeing. Obviously, that's important, right? But we really need to understand what are those assumptions or guesses, right? Our understanding of the business world and our business that we're operating with, right? Understanding assumptions, how we're operating our business is going to be critical to really getting a hold of where we're trying to lead, all right? Now, when I say assumptions and I start talking forecasting, I feel like people are thinking this, okay? Like you're looking outside of yourself and we're looking for the answers outside, right? Something magical is going to happen. We're going to hear that, genius business advisor on X podcast, and they're going to solve all our problems. That's where assumptions aren't about looking outside, right? Assumptions are really about looking inside, okay? Assumptions are really looking at what's happening within your business, right? So it is about understanding our future, but it's about understanding our future that we're creating. We're responsible for the creation, right? Good assumptions, just remember they can be measured. I work with assumptions all day long and I get funny assumptions, right? And I'm not saying they're bad. I'll just call them funny because I may not think of them as assumptions, but obviously it's an understanding of the world that the business owners are using and they're making educated guesses about it. And it's something that they're considering in their business, right? But I really want people to understand really good assumptions. They can be measured and we can go back and see whether or not we met that assumption, right? And so I want to just give you an example of a good assumption that can be measured and how that would equate to a business, all right? So we're going to assume we have a company, right? And it has, or it traditionally gives quotes, all right? Quotes for work, right? And so quotes are pending, which represent potential future money, right? In this situation, we have 130 quotes pending. We've talked to 130 different people or businesses, money sitting on the table, and we're waiting for them to come back to either accept that quote and then close the transaction, which means that we get paid. All right, now looking at our past, we look kind of in the back for just a little bit, and we see that we have a closing rate, right? We typically close about 20% of those quotes that are outstanding. Okay, so 130 quotes. We typically have closed 20 of them. We could look a little bit further into the future, right? Not quite a crystal ball, but we can look a little bit further in the future and anticipate that we close the same type of percentage, right? So in that quick assumption, right, the company will close 26 quotes within that current period of time. And I got that 26 quotes by looking at that 130 quotes that were outstanding, multiply that by 20%. I know I can hopefully close at least 26 quotes, right? And then we could even tie that to dollars and say the average quote is X dollars, 26 times the average quote of X equals Y dollar amounts, right? You see how I'm not necessarily looking in the future to decide I'm going to make $1 million. I'm looking at what I'm dealing with currently on the ground, looking a little bit behind me, trying to see trends like that 20% close rate, and then just looking and taking that insight into the future, just a toe, right, to understand what might be happening. That's what I'm talking about, measurable assumptions, right? I assume the company will close 26 quotes. I'm basing that guess off of quality information and experience that I have to make it happen, right? And if we wanted to take that a step further, right, maybe 26 quotes closed isn't enough to meet the demands of the increasing costs that we're dealing with in our business. Maybe I need 30 quotes, right? So as a financial leader, right, I would ask my team to improve those close rates and give them goals. Improve it 4 more quotes than what you have historically done. Maybe that's, 4 salespeople. I'm asking each one of them to close 1 more than what they have historically done. And I'm leading them to improve the operational efficiency so we can get around the problem. See how that works? Okay. So let's talk about coming up with assumptions. I know it's not so easy, right? But really, it's an art. It's an art of understanding your business, understanding what you're dealing with in the future, and balancing that, right? I'm just going to give you an idea that it's not as difficult as what you might think. You got all that you need inside, right? We're not looking outside, we're looking inside. And there's 2 different categories of assumptions that I really want you to get good at. Right? It's revenue assumptions, guessing about future revenue, similar to what we did in that little example a moment ago with 130 quotes, right? Looking at what we have, those are relationships, demands, surveys, sales funnel that you already have. You're looking at your future revenue, and then you're looking at your expenses, right? We ultimately have control over this. We really, really do. And if we have the right insight and information, right, that's assumptions, then we know what needs to happen in our business in order to improve. So assumptions should be easy to measure and easy to verify, right? Just like we talked about with the quotes, easy to look in the system and see how many quotes there are, easy to measure when we close those quotes, right? So I could be looking at quote numbers and close rates, right? Those would be reports that I could pull to verify where we are in that assumption. Okay, just remember that we can't get married to these assumptions. It feels like we should because we feel comfortable with them, right? It feels like certainty. And human nature just wants to grab that certainty and bring it in, right? Just remember that the world is changing around us. It's almost like we're in that desert storm and the sand is shifting, right? It's being blown this way and that way. If we hold on to assumptions without really understanding that they could be changing around us, it could be dangerous for us. So we need to be constantly looking outside at the conditions or what we're dealing with and just remeasuring or re-understanding what's happening, right? But just remember there's that connection to assumptions helping us make the future happen rather than predicting it, right? We are the ones that make the future happen, right? Like you literally have the power within your hands. And it's hard work, often dirty work, right? But we really do make our assumptions and our future. So instead of having the, you know, genie, fortune telling genie out there, right? The crystal ball, right? It really is our own hands that make the future happen and just having a good insight in what we're dealing with. And we're in control on this. All right, so that's assumptions. Now, what the assumptions look like for you, right? It's all going to be different. But I'm going to preach that we just need to understand our cash cycle, right? And so a cash cycle is, cash in the bank at the beginning, right? How you go through that transaction. So maybe you have to purchase goods. Money goes out of the bank to purchase the goods. You sell those goods, right? Right, so you ship those goods or collect the money from the sales, right? And that goes back into your bank and you're done, right? Whatever that cycle of cash looks like for your business, you need to really get clear with what's happening and how you're offering those goods and services to your customers or clients and how the cash is moving, right? And that's essentially where we start the conversation for the financial forecast. Now, if you haven't played a lot with forecasting, you're not alone. A lot of businesses haven't, right? A lot of business owners have operated instinctively, right? Or through their experience or knowledge and haven't really played a lot with looking into the future by putting together their expenses and revenue guesses or assumptions, right? And really trying to understand it. I'm going to invite you to this conversation because I'm going to say this is really where you get a little bit more comfort a little bit more peace in operating your business and making decisions when you just take a tiny bit of time and start looking at how those assumptions, those guesses about your environment and your business, looking at how they play out on paper before they actually happen, right? It's almost like you can watch a little preview of what's about to take place and have a good understanding of what you need to do, right? Or what maybe needs to change before that destiny takes place, right? You have that type of control. So I'm going to lay this out for you. It's not difficult. We always have a start, right? Just like anything in life, we always have a start. All right. So for you to start to come up with a financial forecast, I'm going to ask you to take a look at your profit and loss statement, also known as income statement, and just pull that document out. All right. It could be for the end of 2021. That's easy. It could be for any time in 2022. Just pull the document out. All right. Remember, we talked about looking for assumptions for revenue and expenses, right? All right. So you start asking yourself these questions. These are questions for you to take away and ask yourself once you're looking at your profit and loss or income statement. First is, how is your revenue stated? Is all your revenue lumped together into one category? Do you have different types of revenue streams? Maybe it's better for you to see those revenue streams separated so you know how much revenue is coming from different activities or different goods, right? You have control, right? Depends on what you need to see in order to lead your business and to make strong, accurate assumptions. Okay, that's question one. Question two is, do you have any costs of goods? We also call that COGS. Just giving an example, if I was a t-shirt reseller, meaning that I bought t-shirts, maybe I imprinted something on them, right? I don't know. But then I resold them to customers under my own brand. That's a t-shirt reseller, right? I have to have the t-shirts themselves before I can sell them. So the t-shirt materials, that good, right, would be a cost of goods sold. And then the markup would be my profit, right? All right, so that's an example of what cost of goods sold are. Not all business has cost of goods sold. I'm just going to state that right now. In the United States, 80% of businesses are what we call service businesses. They provide a service, and there's very little costs associated to those services. And historically, those costs could be included in just your normal expenses, not necessarily separated out into a separate cost of goods sold. Understood? So you may not have cost of goods sold, and that might be completely normal for your business. You would be in good company, right? 80% of businesses would have that situation. But you may have cost of goods sold, raw material costs, product costs, packaging costs, right? And that might be something that you have historically watched or monitored. Okay, so question, answer the cost of good question. All right, so what are your expense categories? So on that profit and loss, right, after the revenue and cost of goods sold, there's usually expense categories. Advertising, automobile, right? It's usually in alphabetical order. What are those expense categories, right? Answer those for yourself. And do you separate those expenses that you need to most monitor, right? Let's say you're looking at something like freight costs, right? Maybe you don't put freight in a separate category. Maybe you just put that with office expenses. And when you're looking at your expenses, you as a business owner or a financial leader know that freight has increased, but you don't have a clear view of how much it's increased to allow you to compare that to other aspects of your revenue, right? You may want to include or separate out those expenses for your forecast so you can get a clearer understanding of what you need to be monitoring or measuring, right? The metrics. All right, next, what relationships exist between that revenue and those expenses? There's usually some type of direct connection. So I'm going to go back to the wage conversation since that is kind of our goal today, right? To talk about increased wages. Maybe you make money off of billable hours, right? Having the team or salespeople. And there's a direct connection between your revenue and that labor, right? That would be a relationship that exists between revenue and expenses that you want to measure and understand. Maybe, for example, your labor is 20% of your historical revenue. And so if you were to forecast getting more labor, more people, you could look at that historical revenue relationship and say, I can increase my revenue another 20% for each of those new team members that I bring on, right? Because you understand that relationship. So look for relationships between revenue and expenses. Now, it may not just be labor, it may be something like, product costs or service costs or other things that increase. You just want to make sure that your forecast takes into consideration those relationships. All right, and then ask yourself, how do you monitor those relationships? How do you make sure those relationships are either working or not working or changing, right? Everything's changing around us. We're in that sandstorm. How do you monitor those relationships? And that's where we start to understand um, dashboards, right? Key performance indexes, KPIs, where we're constantly looking at those relationships to understand the health of the business. All right, so that's the start. All right, now once you've started, then we go to actually do the work. Okay, so the work is not so difficult. It feels like it, right? I'm saying work. But this is where you would try to get a copy of a blank forecasting template from your SBDC advisor. They've got all kinds of templates available. Understanding a financial forecast, they also call it a pro forma, right? Financial projection. They'll have templates that you can easily access, but work with your advisor on this. Okay, that's going to be a good relationship. Before you start inputting numbers on that template, I want you to do a couple of key things, right? I want you to write down those revenue and expense assumptions. Remember, those were those guesses about the future. Write them down on paper, right? You want to look at the history. So what have you historically seen? Maybe you're starting to see a change, right? So you're going to try to understand the future. And then understand any type of marketing and internal metrics that you're using or you have seen that maybe help you understand that revenue and expense assumptions. I want you to be very specific. When I say specific, I mean go into the details, right? This is for you so that you can remember what you did, and it's for outside support. That could be from investors, it could be for your business advisor who's trying to support you, right? It could be for your employees or your team, board of directors, right? This is for others to understand what those assumptions were and what you're basing the future revenue on. All right, so be specific. Remember, you can always verify progress on meeting those assumptions, right, or understanding those assumptions through financial reports. So you have to ask your question, when you're looking at these written assumptions, is there a way that you can verify and show progress? Right? Maybe you want to increase the sales, right, or increase leads, or increase closings, or increase, all kinds of assumptions you could come up with, right? Is there a way for you to go back and verify that you met those assumptions or you were off, right? And start to think about how you might need to craft those financial reports in order to keep on top of looking at your forecast. All right, so that's honestly the hardest work right there. That's the work. All right. Now, I couldn't let you go in this conversation without giving you a couple of tips. All right. So, a big tip here is that the world isn't necessarily going to go the way we think it's going to go, right? We know that. We just lived through a pandemic together, right? Remember, they told us 2 weeks at first, right? Here we are, year two, going into year three, right? Things are going to change, right? So that's where you try to understand different scenarios. And so I want you to revisit your assumptions that have been written down, right, in the work. and start thinking, what's my best case? What's my most likely case? And what does my worst case look like? Now, remember those assumptions you wrote down? Remember, I gave you that example, 130 quotes, 20% close. That gives me 26 new quotes that should close. All right, that might be my most likely case, but what would be my best case? Maybe I close 40%. So instead of 26, I'm closing, 53. I don't know. Quotes, right? And then that could be my best case. What's my worst case? Maybe that's 10 closed quotes, right? And I drop from being 26 down to, I don't know, 13 in that case. So come up with an understanding of those scenarios, what would be best, most likely, and worst case. Write it down, right? You're going to have 3 different sets of assumptions for those 3 different scenarios. And then you'll understand, because you've written them down, what's going to change in your assumptions between the scenarios, between the best, worst, or most likely case. You'll understand there's going to be a metrics to that, right? So you'll see pretty clearly if trends are going in a certain direction, which scenario you're actually living through, right? Or what you're preparing, or what might happen, right? So you have to ask yourself, will you know as a leader if your company starts to slip between the scenarios? If you're able to clearly say when you're in different scenarios, you're much, much more inclined to be able to know when you're headed to a scenario, right? And then because you have already thought about this ahead of time, you should be able to understand what you're going to need to do, right? What needs to happen to move from one scenario to the next. For instance, let's say you didn't make that sale, or last month you didn't close 26 quotes, right? Now you're starting to slip. Well, how far can you go, and what's the worst that can happen in that worst case, right? There's a lot of power in knowing what those future losses might look like if you got to that point, and then being able to see how you start to turn that around, right? Or, worst case, how you get the funds to offset the losses, right? How you maneuver within your resources to cover that. Okay, so that's the beauty of scenarios. Once you've done this level of work, when you can really see what might happen and try to understand those little assumptions, right? And those are hard assumptions that are based in numbers so you can see trends. That's when you move to that template I talked about, and then you start putting in those assumptions into writing into numbers, right? Make sure that you are following your assumptions. There typically are going to be 3 different sets of templates for each scenario, right? And then I recommend breaking those numbers down into a month-to-month forecast so you can actually see how changes happen from month to month. But the best part is once you have this, you'll be able to go back and input historical information and compare it to that forecasted. So you really see, where you are and where it could go, right? And just being able to project profitability will help you make decisions. It'll help you understand what needs to happen in order to get from one month to the next, right, to survive. It feels like a lot, but I promise you, it's one of those things like if you're in a jigsaw puzzle, right, and you get started and your mind starts looking for the pieces and you're just automatically in that seek and put in, you can get to that point in forecasting because you are understanding the connection and the pieces and what you're trying to build, right? It looks a little cumbersome until you're in it, but once you're in it, it can become an extremely valuable conversation to have. Okay. All right. So we came today to talk about inflation and paying your employees. So I'm going back to this whole labor conversation, right? I didn't leave you hanging there. All right. So what are your assumptions about your revenue and labor? Let's get really clear about that, remember? Because it wasn't so easy, right? We've got this kind of deep problem where raw material costs are up. And of course, to get the raw material costs like shipping and receiving, that's up, right? And we know that they're going to take money out of the economy. And when they take money out of the economy, right, through increased pricing and such, then the demand starts to lower, right? So we're in this kind of up and down mode, right? I need you to understand for your own business, can you afford to raise those wages in the company? How important is that to you? Right? What needs to happen in other areas of your business to make sure that you have the operational efficiency so that you can continue operating well, right? Remember, those assumptions are going to give you ideas of how things are going to go. Can you change other things? Can you afford it, right? And can you communicate these assumptions and the expectations for those assumptions to your staff? And when I say expectations, I know that there's a conversation all small business owners have to have with their team, right? Because we are small business owners and things can change on a dime. You have the ability to tell them what needs to take place to continue paying those higher wages, right? Or continue offering those benefits. You can say, I absolutely must close 26 quotes this month in order to continue supporting that increased wage. If I don't close that, I'm going to need to take your wage down. Right? I just can't support that based on what I'm dealing with as a business owner and inflation impacts. Being honest and communicating and giving them empowerment and telling them exactly what needs to happen for you to be able to support the labor conversation in that way is really empowering, right? So how often do you need to check on those assumptions to make sure your company stays on track? That's going to be different for every business in this conversation. I can tell you as a small business owner with a team, right? I would do my evaluations monthly. I would look at their efficiency ratios individually. I would look at it as an organization, and I would give guidance and coaching, and I would make requests for closes, right? So that I could operate my business in a manner that still protected everybody involved. You can do the same, right? And coming up with strong assumptions and being able to be clear about that to your team really is important, and tracking it and measuring it so you don't overstep your bounds is important too. It all comes down to effective communication, right? So the inflation is going to impact many areas of our business, not just our labor, right? Our cost of raw goods, cost of services internally, it's going to impact everything. We have to monitor the overall health of the business, right? Because the business is that economic energy. And so we have to make sure that we're keeping it healthy, right? But being able to communicate with our staff, that's priceless. That helps us be able to help them, right? And together we get further down the road. Right. And then setting clear goals for performance is important, because if the performance isn't there to support the whole, right, we can stop and change things, and then we can make sure that we're not going at risk or risking the livelihood of the business. Right. So we have to review and we have to measure these goals for performance. That is absolutely critical. I know it's not fun, it's not comfortable, right? It forces you into a different mindset, it forces you into a different relationship with those that you're trying to hold accountable, your team members, but it is critical. So I'm going to ask you to make that part fun. All right, I've said this before in other conversations. When you have a review or you're measuring goals or you're looking at your performance and it's not comfortable for you, it's not what you love, right? Maybe looking at financial reports isn't something that makes you excited, okay? It makes you cringe. Make it fun somehow, whether you have to go and treat yourself to a nice lunch, right? And look over it as you're having that meal that you love, right? Maybe it's going for a nice coffee. Maybe it's connecting that material with a close friend that you trust that can be a mentor, right? And they can help you through it. Hold your hand as you're doing the review. I don't know how you're going to do it, but just make sure that you're doing it and you're getting the most out of that conversation. All right. And best of all, you got to have an action plan for that worst case scenario. And if you're seeing that worst case scenario start to play out, right? You know what you need to do in order to offset it. You're not sitting there in sleepless nights, right? Or taking it out on your family or taking it out on those close team members because you're panicked, right? Having that action place, having already played out that worst case scenario and know what it looks like so you can define it, it's going to help you operate with more peace. Doesn't mean it's going to make it any less worse, right? But hopefully you'll be able to not be reactive. You can be proactive and you can start navigating around it, which leads me to one of those last conversations we talked about, right? Financial leadership. Leadership in general is wonderful. Financial leadership is extremely empowering, right? So you have this type of leader inside you, whether you realize it or not. You may hate numbers. You might be an artist at heart, okay? All of us can become our own chief financial officers or CFOs, right? It's not beyond us, it's within our reach. Understanding your forecast, thinking about those assumptions, understanding the numbers, that comes natural when you put a little work into it. As a business owner, no one knows your business better than you. You think you might be able to go outside of yourself and hire somebody to do all of this work and tell you what's going to happen. They're not the one behind the numbers. They're not the one leading, right? Making things happen with their own hands. That's you. That's you as your own financial leader. So just make sure that you're setting up some clear goals and expectations for yourself, for your team member, for those that are supporting you, right? And then just focus your intention on what matters most, what you need to focus on in order to make those numbers happen, right? Clear decision making, taking away the emotion, taking away the fear. Clear decision making is so important. It's all within your reach. It really, really is. All right, so this all sounds good, right? Sounds a little maybe far, a little uncomfortable, maybe a lot of work, right? But I need you to hold the line. Okay? That's tough, right? I know what it means to hold the line. That means that you got to do it, right? So now you got to lock yourself up, right? Take away all distractions, get really comfortable with those assumptions, get that financial template from your business advisor. Probably ask your business advisor to hold you accountable, set up a meeting in the future so that you're gonna have to provide this type of work for that conversation, right? Do what you got to do. Rely on your team that's there to help you. All right. But this is honestly going to be the hardest and most rewarding job is managing through change. All right. Seeing issues in your business and then knowing what you need to do, creating the action plan and actually achieving it. It is hard. I know. It's so much easier to go back to the old ways and not care. I know. Been there, right? But I have to tell you that the whole world's changing around us, right? And if we don't do this, if we don't hold the line, right, and really try to lead through this change, we're not going to have a business or our business will fall. All right. So we must understand that change is all around us. Our businesses will change. We know that for certain. Understanding the change, right? Getting clear with those three different assumptions, right? And getting peace around what's happening is going to help us be a good leader. That's what's needed. It's not going to be easy. I'll never promise it'll be easy. It'll feel like you're being torn apart, right? But you have to make time for your numbers. Pull together that support team, right? Make sure that business advisor is part of that support team. Pull them all around you and really help you focus on the most important things and make the change happen. All right. I know this is so hard. I understand, but it is doable. And I promise you, when you do it and you come away from it, you're going to feel so good, right? And hopefully your business will be so much stronger and healthier because of the sacrifice. All right, so we're to the very end, my friends. It's noon on the dot. Here we go. So in summary, inflation will continue to be a challenge for the next few years. It's not just now that we're feeling it. It's not going to just go away overnight. This is something that we have to wrestle with. You have to wrestle with this. We don't have a choice, all of us, right? Labor issues are a part of that bigger picture, the bigger problem. Right? We are becoming a solution for those that don't have a business to operate, right? That's going to task us to be better about our business and to be stronger and to understand how we're making that impact, understand how we're making our profit, right? We are part of the solution to inflation, right? So you have the ability to understand your market, right? And to create the future. Remember those two hands that were worn and dirty, right? Those are your hands. You make the future. It is all about you, right? So what does your business future look like, right? What does that look like for your business? And then what can your current and future employees look forward to? What do they know you're going to create? How are you going to solve those challenges, right? How are you going to keep everybody strong and healthy? Whew, that's deep. All right, so my name is Rebecca Schultz, and I love what I do. I love talking about money. I love talking about finances and the future and how you make it all work. If you have questions about the presentation or something in the presentation and you feel that you need to talk with me, feel free, reach out to me, right? But outside of this, you've got your SBDC advisors. Your SBDC advisors are trained experts. They can support you, right? They can be your accountability partner. They can mirror or share with you what they're seeing within the conversation to help you be at your best. So you are never alone. And with that, hopefully there might be some questions that I can answer. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Okay, if anyone has questions, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask those questions.
Hey, Rebecca, it's Roger.
Hey, Roger.
How are you?
Good.
Good. That was, yeah, again, just that was a great presentation by you with some great details. I have a question because I've heard this just a little bit from businesses as they try to get creative with their employees, right? Because people are looking for higher wages. They're, you know, it's just tough, right? And you know that you have some good employees sometimes and you want to keep them, but you know, like you were saying, that there may be a lag between being able to raise that up or, just too much constraints with cost of goods or whatever to just raise it up right now. But what are your thoughts on, other types of compensation? And one that I've had a couple of conversations with is time, right? And so employers have kind of gone to their employees that they want to keep, right? But they can't raise them up and said, let's talk about time. What can we potentially reduce your hours but still pay you the same? Can we give you an additional week off of vacation? Can we, just do some other types of things? And I just wanted to get any thoughts you might have on that.
I love that because time is valuable and understanding. I mean, you know what, Roger? That comes to understanding your employees and developing a culture that's going to keep and retain and reward strong talent so that you can continue to benefit from it. And so I'm going to put that time conversation, I'm going to put other aspects like, I hear other business owners saying, well, they value Starbucks gift cards or they value, XYZ, right? Any of those considerations really becomes part of that fostering culture that you're trying to attract new talent and maintain talent. So it's a bigger conversation. What type of culture are you creating, right? Maybe it's a culture of, having a little bit more personal freedom, not being micromanaged, right? Maybe they're encouraged to take on other projects. Maybe they're entrepreneurs where they'll be able to go ahead and help the business grow themselves, right? With their talents and they want the opportunity to help increase revenue, not only for themselves, right, but for the business. I think you take that into a deeper one-on-one conversation to try to figure out where those employees see their value and see their interests. and come up with a plan on how you not only do you try to compensate them in order to improve their understanding of being rewarded through the position, but maybe as part of a culture, as part of a deeper conversation, you're taking that understanding outside the box. I love the time. I can certainly appreciate that. Other aspects, other business owners may not be able to do that just simply because their labor creates the wages to which drives the revenue. And if they're gone, zero revenue, right? Like, I don't know. It's not going to necessarily be the answer for every employer, but certainly understanding what makes those employees or the culture strong and then being able to come up with solutions in keeping that type of environment strong, I think is a solution. We should just give a
Yeah.
culture
Great.
class, you know?
There you go.
One thing, because I deal with numbers all day, and I helped people for many years, even on the consumer side. I think helping people learn how to budget better is a skill set that they didn't necessarily teach in school. A lot of people have gotten away from it. I was talking to my kids just the other day, my teenagers, and they were telling me about their friends doing Uber Eats. And I remember being struck by that because, you know, little fun fact, I've never used Uber Eats. I've never used DoorDash. If I can't get in the car and go get the food or make it for myself, I guess I'm not eating. All right. But these teenagers that had no jobs were doing Uber Eats. And I'm like, how did they that is a very fascinating conversation. Like, walk me through how they justify that increased costs for that good when they don't have any money. And I honestly, I'll laugh about this, but I think education about costs and about, financial budgeting and, putting all that in perspective isn't something that's really ingrained in our economic culture today, and people lose sight of that for convenience, right? They just do what they feels good. I'm not blaming anybody or saying that everybody's like that. I'm just saying it's something I have personally noticed, and employers do have the ability to offer, not force people, but to offer additional training and resources to help their employees better manage their money, right? Better manage their budget, which then reduces the stress of the employer for having to be the person that constantly shelters or supports that person through those personal financial crises, right? There's a whole thing out there about it. And just as a tip, credit unions are really good about coming in and doing that type of financial training and providing resources at low to no cost for consumers so they can get better control and understand how to save and grow. And, you know, helping individuals be better money managers can be even more valuable in the long run than just simply increasing the wages by a dollar or $2, right? Just helping them be better. I don't know, just a thought.
Yep. I think that your kids must know my kids, or their friends know my friends or something. I don't know.
It's like, what's
But
going on with this?
yeah. I've often thought it would be great to have this level of conversation, even though a little bit over their head, but bring it down to the younger generation because just of that managing of that money is just anyway. Thank you. You've answered my question, and thank you for all the great information, Rebecca.
My pleasure. Anytime, team. I love it.
May I?
Yes, please do,
Go
Brett.
for it.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much again for all of this great and valuable information and ways to look at things from a different angle. Is it going to only continue to go one direction with inflation and with costs of for example, when you go out to eat now, everybody's accepted the fact that now it's going to cost you anywhere between 7 to 12% more just because of everything going on. Okay. And whether it's the cost of food, whether it's the cost of labor, we have to pass that on to you. And since you want to come out of your house and not use Uber Eats, just kidding. I don't use it either. But when you go out to a restaurant and you're paying this, is this just going to be a continued is this the direction we have to go? And then eventually everybody gets paid more, everybody spends more, and the percentages are pretty much either going to be the same, or you lose a little, you gain a little, but it will just eventually outprice ourselves? Or is there ever going to be a reset? What do you see for that?
Yeah, so essentially the money coming out of the economy is going to delay the demand, right? There's going to be this time where the goods and services demand is going to be a little bit more down to that cost. People are going to stop spending. And that's that in the presentation. I don't like to like say, hey, it's going to end tomorrow, because that's not necessarily what's going to happen, right? But it's got to catch up. And that's where we start to fight inflation, is where demand and goods and services start to equal out again, right? And that's where we'll start to see. But the concern is we rush out and hire all these people and start paying them a lot of money, right? Demand starts to go down because costs are rising and people are starting to scale back and demand starts. And then guess what's happened? You're left with too many people and too much overhead, right? And then you got to kind of, it's like we are stair stepping and having to be nimble and understand the changes, right? Like I do that quicksand or the sandstorm approach. Everything's changing around us and it's going to continue changing. And so it's never going to be the same. Up, down. We just have to be prepared in our business to see the change and to maneuver around it, understanding, like, again, worst case, best case, most likely scenarios, knowing what that looks like for our business and just changing with it based on those relationships and how we're supposed to be operating. And I listen to economists. Remember, it's like flipping a coin sometimes. I don't know, heads or tails. Sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't, right? But they do say consistently across all channels that we're going to be dealing with this for a couple of years. So, you know, I don't know. Again, I think about that meme, right? This is what happened. There's a fire. And we're all like, oh my goodness, right? Like, we're living in it. We're living in the chaos right now. Well, hopefully we can get around it.
Thank you for that commentary there. And I agree. I think that that's very, very true.
So Rebecca, do you think that it would be, I mean, all of this change that we're going through, and we're getting, we become nimble, adjust and everything, but the process keeps going up. The inflation continues to grow. Would that be a reason for a bubble, like the housing bubble in 2008?
There's a lot of talk. I won't go into specifics, but there's a lot of talk that we will get into a bubble. And I mentioned earlier my concern about the subprime lenders, right? Anytime you see subprime lenders, I start to get really worried
Yeah.
because, that forces a bubble in many respects because they are creating additional expense when other outside pressures are already current and causing problems. They're not, helping, right? They're creating a bigger problem. And so definitely worry about increased credit card expense, worry about student loan debt repayment issues if those don't get paid, worry about the debt crisis internationally, right?
Mhm.
Not having access to credit or not repaying credit terms impacting all of us. All of that is present in this very circular volatile storm. Any one of those could cause, another major issue. And we just really don't know how far this is going to go. All we can do, right? I keep coming back to the image of those hands. All we can do is understand our little corner of the world, understand the ins and outs of it, right? How we monitor and protect that. And then, to the best of our ability, lead the people that have accepted us as their leader through the desert, right? Or through the uncertainty so we can hopefully get to the other side. Um, Inflation will come. We most likely will see bubbles burst. We have to navigate around those unpleasantries, and people just have to get better at managing their own budget, right? Because Like we don't know. 15% in food costs just this year. We're in the first quarter. We're about to end the first quarter tomorrow. Uh, we don't know how much more.
Kind of in addition to what Roger was saying, I'm going to piggyback on that. You're talking about businesses that are being hit hard, and they were hit hard through the pandemic. Restaurants, specifically, there are others that are impacted by this, but restaurants are closing or having to change their model because they cannot get wait staff. They can't get restaurant staff, or they get the staff, but this restaurant down the street is paying $2 more than what I'm making now, so I'm going to go there. So it's all of that uncertainty. Is there looking at other incentives other than time off? Because, like you said, in a restaurant environment, time off is going to kind of create that problem of, okay, we don't have people to do what you do now, so I can't give you any more than we can do. So looking at possible incentives like the gift cards, like the Starbucks, or going bigger and looking at a gift card from Old Navy or something for your performance over the past month or whatever. Would the cost of those incentives come out of another pocket?
Potentially, I've seen so many, like, let's talk about the restaurant industry because I saw some creative things happening that I thought were really cool, right?
Mhm.
And some of that was, for instance, gift cards. So think about this, right? Gift cards are a great thing for that industry because they're getting access to future revenue now, right? And maybe those people lose the gift cards, right? Or the person that they gave the gift card to never uses it. And so that they'll come back as a repeat person and it's more money. And so I saw where they would do big challenges where whoever gets X dollar amounts in gift cards, right, money for the business owner, will get
Mhm.
a portion of those gift cards, right, a portion of the revenue. So then it created almost like a team environment where they're going at it, they get rewarded individually for it,
Mhm.
they're providing a good service to the customer client, everybody wins. You know, I keep coming back to that whole culture conversation because I really feel like it's what you do as a group as opposed to treating those individual employee relationships as unique, separate relationships. I'm not saying they're not, right? But again, you as a leader, you're leading an organization and strong talent, right? Strong talent comes from having a cohesive team, knowing that you as a business owner don't have to sweat at night or have to constantly be there to babysit your
Mhm.
employees is coming back to a culture, right? Having a culture of work ethic or an environment where they understand what's expected of them at all times. And the solution to this labor and understanding what kind of offsets you can give comes to that type of culture or that team, right? Maybe they want a pool party, right? Or maybe they just want to go to a network function together, right, as a cohesive. I don't know. It doesn't necessarily have to cost money, but it does have to bring the group together and keep them functioning and communicating and feeling a part of something bigger that ultimately empowers. In that type of environment, with similar like-minded individuals, brings them in and creates a solid labor pool. It's a bigger conversation for sure.
Rebecca, if I may, I was just going to piggyback on something that Paula piggyback off of me. So, uh, the what I have seen, or I guess more heard from a restaurant, is technology may be, helping with this solution too, because this one restaurant is actively talking with their POS developer that's going to give them I don't know what to call it other than like little mini iPads at the table that they can come in, sit themselves, basically, order from the menu right then and there. That ticket goes right into the kitchen, and then, then you have somebody that brings it out. It just, what they're selling it as is, less individuals trying to help some of that labor pool out. I just thought that was kind of interesting. But the other thing I wanted to ask is, and this is kind of going more broadly than maybe this is on here, but do you believe that, well, I believe that the economy over in Europe with what's going on would potentially lead them down, um, I don't want to say recession, but it's going to be a downward turn for a little while. In and in with that, I think both China and Japan are helping support their own stock markets by some of the financial decisions that they're making or their governments are making, which hence I believe is going to keep our rates artificially low and potentially the Fed not raising as much as they keep saying? And do you think that's going to have any effect on inflation?
I think the feds are pretty set on what they're going to do. Really do. Unless they see signs actively in the market that are contrary to it, I think they are going to increase the rates for the next 6 meetings that they have, and we'll see those prime rates increase. I don't think that we're going to see anything different than that. I also, as far as like the loan, the capital, commercial capital market, I will say most lenders are going to have to go to a variable rate schedule. Maybe they'll fix an interest rate for a period of time, a short period of time, but I think that they're going to have to go variable. And I think over the next few years, we're going to have to ride this out. And as far as international trade and international markets, definitely will impact us. Um, the one good thing, I feel like the US, even as messy as we feel like it is, right? We don't have a war going on. Thank God, right? We'll be impacted from abroad, but we still have quite a bit of stability internally to help us navigate around. I don't think, as far as our nation, it would get horrible, but we do have to, as a society, understand like money's got to come out. Like they just pumped a ton of money in to our economy. Money's got to come out, and that's going to impact all of us. All of us have a part to play in that and understanding, the harsh reality. So we have to figure out how to do more with less, essentially. And maybe that plays into the green energy, right? Maybe that plays into conservatorship. I don't know. It We could see some amazing things happen because we as Americans always seem to kind of buck up and get through difficult times together. But yeah, I really foresee the rates going up and money coming out. I see interest or demand going down, and small businesses will be at the helm, really fronting a lot of that change.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. Thank you.
Uh, What kind of impact do you think this will have, all of these issues that are being discussed, have on the housing market? Right now in my area, there's, I bet there's 1,500 housetops being built, in the process of being built. Uh, how might that impact the housing market?
So there's still strong demand for the housing market, right? That is something even that our government has put as a priority to make available to Americans. But with that, right, we talked about consumer debt rising,
Mhm.
right? Qualifying for that housing may, if those trends continue, may become more difficult. And so there could potentially be a slowdown in the buying. That doesn't mean that demand will see a slowdown because individuals have to live somewhere, right?
Mhm.
And, who knows, right? We might be seeing an influx of immigration coming into the US, which will also increase demand. I feel like the housing market will continue to see an increase in demand. But I will say, like with all of this international conversation, we haven't seen anything on the Build Back Better. The second, round of funding that was supposed to take us to 3 trillion, that hasn't come back around, or I haven't heard anything about it lately. And with them trying to fight inflation, having more government money come back into the economy seems a little less likely. I mean, who knows, right? But yes, I don't think there's going to be a huge shift in demand. I think there'll still be demand. I'm not sure that it will make tons of sense for lots of developers to jump into that space with prices and costs being higher. It kind of weeds out profitability with the uncertainty on the market. A lot of individuals I'm seeing are kind of shying away, even lenders shying away until we get a little bit more certainty involved. But time will tell.
Last question I have. You mentioned student loan debt.
Yeah.
Are you seeing anything? Are you hearing anything about forgiveness? You hear rumors and you hear all sorts of plans, and it's in Congress or whatever. Right?
You
But you
know
don't
what?
know what's true.
Yeah, so I will give you my own personal opinion. By the way, this is my own personal opinion. It does not say
Gotcha.
anything about the SBDC at all, okay? And that is, it would be really, really difficult for them to do a loan forgiveness program
Mhm.
for the student debt. It would just be extremely difficult. That doesn't mean it won't happen. It would just be difficult. Because just like, I'm trying to give you a comparison, but it's like buying stock in a company that's on the market, right? Let's say we're going to buy Disney stock, right? My kids love Encanto, by the way. They are singing it left and right. Let's say, all right, Disney stock's going for X dollars. Right? If you were to go out on the street corner, right, and try to sell that stock, it's going to be a little awkward, right? Trying to untangle what yours is from theirs, it's all together. It's in like this giant ball, essentially. And that's what the student loan debt's like. When student loan debt is created, there are investors like that debt gets divided up amongst a pool of investors that own
Okay.
certain percentages. And then to forgive that debt, then you essentially have to tell those investors that are it's sitting on their portfolio as an asset, they don't have an asset anymore, right? So guess what? Now your assets went down in value. And so the type of companies that hold on to those portfolios are going to be, retirement pension funds, 401k funds. Now all of a sudden across the nation, right? Huge losses in those type of portfolios as they're racing to stabilize the market. Coming back and forgiving student loan debt would be the opposite of doing that. So I think it's one of those tug of wars, and we're not in a position right now to see the student loan debt get forgiven and take on those type of losses. Now, if there was giant losses to the economy and the market in general, right, and there's a huge devalue of it, and they decided, okay, it's not worth anything anyways, and all these portfolios took these losses, maybe, right? But it's
Uh-huh.
very, very difficult to untangle that web of investment to take those losses.
Okay, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. Okay, going, gone. Anyone else? Nothing? Nothing, Brett? Um, okay, I'm going to share this screen and talk about this is our upcoming webinar. It's tomorrow, and we're going to hear another perspective on cryptocurrency, which is it is such a hot topic, and we're hearing all sorts of different angles on cryptocurrency. And so this is going to be interesting. I know I thoroughly enjoyed your discussion last week, and This one is going to be wonderful. So for those that are listening to this webinar, I hope you can join us tomorrow for cryptocurrency, what every small business must know. If not, please look for it on our YouTube channel. And after you listen to this one, go listen to the cryptocurrency one as well. You can access our YouTube channel through sbdc.nctc.edu, where you're going to find all of the webinars that we've done for the past year and a half on there as an extensive library that's available to you at no cost. You can use the QR code in the upper right-hand corner, and it will take you to our website. While you're there, you can get contact information. You can schedule an appointment with an advisor. You can find other resources for small business owners that we already have existing on our website. As I mentioned earlier, we'd like to thank the Small Business Administration, the State of Texas, North Texas SBDC Regional Office, North Central Texas College, our host institution, and all of these are our benefactors that actually create the grant funding for us so that we can be here to help you in any way. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. If not, please be sure and check out all of the webinars that we have posted. This is going to end our webinar today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, team.